Being home alone can feel peaceful until it doesn't. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the corner, and every sound in the silence can twist into something far more sinister. Tonight, we're diving into 3 true Home Alone horror stories that will make you think twice the next time you lock the doors and settle in by yourself. Story 1. The footsteps upstairs. Maya had the house to herself for the weekend while her parents were away. At 17, she liked the independence, but she also couldn't shake a small uneasiness about being completely alone. Their 2-story home sat at the edge of a wooded area, and once the sun went down, the shadows outside seemed to press against the windows. That night, Maya settled on the couch with a blanket and her laptop, scrolling through movies. The house creaked occasionally, but she reminded herself that older houses always made noise as the temperature shifted. Around midnight, though, a sound broke her concentration, a faint thump from upstairs. Her head snapped up. The dog was at her side, ears perked, growling softly. She muted her laptop and listened. The sound came again, this time unmistakable. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving across the second floor. Maya's blood ran cold. She was supposed to be alone. She grabbed her phone and dialed her mom, whispering, "I think someone's in the house." Her mother told her to call the police immediately, but Maya was too scared to even move from the couch. The footsteps grew louder, pacing across her parents' bedroom, then down the hall. The floorboards creaked with every step. Maya clutched the dog close, praying it was just her imagination. But then came a noise that proved otherwise. The squeak of her bedroom door slowly opening upstairs. Her phone slipped in her shaking hands as she called 911. The operator's calm voice grounded her just enough to whisper what was happening. The dispatcher told her to stay on the line and remain quiet. The footsteps descended the stairs, each creak a dagger in her chest. Maya ducked behind the couch, trying to keep the dog silent. She could see the shadow of legs moving at the bottom of the staircase, pausing, listening. The intruder walked slowly into the living room. Maya's heart thudded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. Through the narrow gap under the couch, she saw his boots stop inches from where she hid. Suddenly, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance. The man froze, then bolted toward the back door. Maya peeked just enough to see him vanish into the woods. Police arrived minutes later, searching the property, but the intruder was gone. They found muddy footprints across the upstairs carpet, a window forced open in her parents' bedroom, and the faint outline of a crowbar left near the back door. Maya's parents rushed home the next morning, shaken by what could have happened. For weeks afterward, Maya couldn't sleep without the lights on, and every creak of the floor made her heart race. She realized the most terrifying part wasn't just that a stranger had broken into her home. It was that he had been walking through it, slowly, deliberately, as if he knew exactly where she was hiding. The footsteps upstairs. If that gave you chills, just wait. Our next story proves that sometimes the real danger doesn't break down the door. It stares at you through the glass. Story 2. The Man at the Window. Ben was used to being home alone. At 19, he had his own small apartment on the ground floor of a quiet complex. He worked late shifts at a diner, usually getting home around midnight. One warm summer night, he kicked off his shoes, microwaved leftovers, and sat down to watch TV. Around 1:30 a.m., he heard a faint tapping. At first, he ignored it, assuming it was the pipes or maybe a neighbor moving around upstairs. But the sound came again, sharper this time, like fingernails against glass. Ben muted the TV. The tapping was coming from his living room window. He stood slowly, his chest tight, and walked toward the sound. What he saw made his stomach drop. A man's face was pressed against the glass, grinning. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and locked directly on Ben. The man's breath fogged the glass as he leaned in closer, his hand tapping the pane again with eerie patience. Ben stumbled backward, fumbling for his phone. Before he could dial, the man cupped his hands around his face, trying to peer into the room as if it were a fish tank, and Ben was inside. The blinds had been open just enough for the stranger to watch him for who knows how long. Heart racing, Ben yanked the cord and slammed the blinds shut. He locked the window, then bolted every other one in the apartment. When he finally called the police, his voice shook. The dispatcher asked if the man was still outside. Ben peeked carefully through the blinds. The man was gone. Officers arrived within minutes, searching the area. They found footprints in the mulch beneath the window, circling the apartment multiple times. The man hadn't just walked up randomly. He had been watching, waiting. That night, Ben couldn't sleep. Every rustle of leaves outside, every car passing, made him jump. Around 3 a.m., as he sat frozen on his couch, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It read, "I like your apartment. Cozy, easy to see in." He showed the message to the police, who added it to their report. They advised him to stay with a friend for a few nights, but Ben was too shaken to even think clearly. In the following weeks, the texts kept coming, always from random numbers. Messages like, "Why close the blinds?" or "You shouldn't eat so late, it's not healthy." The stalker knew his habits, his routines. Ben eventually moved out, breaking his lease and relocating to a building on the 3rd floor of a complex across town. But even now, years later, he says he never leaves blinds open after dark. He never sits too close to the window. Because sometimes you're not just home alone. Sometimes someone's already out there, watching. The man at the window. As terrifying as that was, the final story may be the worst of all. Because sometimes the danger isn't outside your home. It's already inside. Story 3. The Voice in the Basement. Lena lived in an old farmhouse her grandparents had left her. It was charming in the daytime, with creaky floors and wide windows that looked out over fields of grass. But at night, the place felt different. Too quiet, too hollow, like the walls were listening. One Friday evening, Lena invited a couple friends over. They watched movies, laughed, and ate pizza until late, but eventually everyone left, and she was alone again. By midnight, the silence had settled heavy over the house. She locked the doors, double-checked the windows, and headed upstairs with a book. Around 2 a.m., Lena was jolted awake by a sound she couldn't place. At first, she thought it was the wind rattling the shutters, but then she heard it again, faint, muffled, and unmistakably human. It was a voice. She froze in bed, straining to listen. The voice was low, rumbling, almost like someone speaking through the floorboards. Her heart began to race as she realized where it was coming from. The basement. Lena tried to calm herself. Maybe it was the old pipes groaning, or the TV she thought she had turned off earlier. She forced herself downstairs to check. Everything was in order. The doors locked, the living room empty. Then she heard it again, this time clearer. A man's voice, deep and deliberate, coming from behind the basement door. She pressed her ear against it, trembling. Words formed through the crack, chilling her to the bone. "I know you're awake." Lena stumbled back, panic seizing her chest. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, whispering what was happening. The dispatcher told her to leave the house immediately and wait for officers outside. But to leave, Lena had to pass the basement door. Every creak of the floor echoed through the silence as she inched toward the front entrance. As she reached for the handle, the voice rose again, this time laughing, low and mocking. Then came a bang, as if someone had thrown their shoulder into the basement door. Lena bolted out into the yard barefoot, clutching her phone. Within minutes, the flashing lights of police cars cut through the darkness. Officers entered the house, weapons drawn. She stood outside, shaking, praying they'd find whoever it was. When they emerged, their faces were grim. The basement window at the back of the house had been pried open. Someone had definitely been inside, but the intruder was gone. The police searched the basement carefully. What they found made Lena's skin crawl. There was a sleeping bag tucked behind an old wardrobe, along with half-empty food wrappers and a notebook filled with scribbled writings. On the very last page, in large, jagged letters, was a single sentence. "She doesn't know I'm here." Lena never spent another night in that farmhouse. She moved in with her sister the very next day and put the property up for sale. Years later, she still wakes in the middle of the night sometimes, certain she hears that same low voice whispering through the floorboards. And she will never forget the moment she realized she hadn't been living alone in that house. Someone else had been there all along, waiting in the dark. Being home alone should mean safety and comfort, but for some, it becomes a waking nightmare. Footsteps in the dark, eyes at the window, voices where no one should be. These are the things that remind us we're never as alone as we think. This is Whispers Between Worlds, and we upload horror daily.